from our university choir, followed by the occasion from Mr. Denzel Goodwin. And then we will have greetings from our Chancellor, Dr. Deborah Saunders White. Please welcome our university choir at this time, coming with Jesus is a Rock in a Weary Land, composed by Glenn Burley.
Jesus is a rock in a weary land, a weary land, a weary land. Jesus is a rock in a weary land, a shelter in the time of storm. Jesus is a rock in a weary land, a weary land, a weary land. Jesus is a rock in a weary land, a shelter in the time of storm. I would not be a sinner. I'll tell you the reason why. I'm afraid my Lord might call my name, and I wouldn't be ready to die. Yes, Jesus is a rock in a weary land, a weary land, a weary land. Jesus is a rock in a weary land, a shelter in the time of storm. I would not be a backslider. I'll tell you the reason why. I'm afraid my Lord might call my name, and I wouldn't be ready to die. Yes, Jesus is a rock in a weary land, a weary land, a weary land. Jesus is a rock in a weary land, a shelter in the time of storm. He is a rock in a weary land. He is a rock in a weary land. He is a rock in a weary land, a shelter in the time of storm. He is a rock in a weary land. He is a rock in a weary land. He is a rock in a weary land, a shelter in the time of storm. Has he ever made a way when you didn't have a dime? Has he ever stepped in just right on time? Has he ever picked you up when you were down? Has he ever put your feet on solid ground? Then you know he is a rock in a weary land, a weary land, a weary land. Then you know he is a rock in a weary land, a shelter in the time of storm. Has he ever made a way when you didn't have a dime? Has he ever stepped in just right on time? Has he ever picked you up when you were down? Has
to the Rock the Mic lecture series, MLK edition. I am Denzel Goodland, your Tom Joyner Foundation Hercules Scholar, and on behalf of our Chancellor, Dr. Deborah Saunders White, the Vice Chancellor of Student Affairs, Dr. Myron Billingsley, and the Executive Director of Student Engagement and Leadership, Dr. Toya Corbett, I bring you greetings. Dr. Martin Luther King, the man, the minister, the martyr, the Nobel Peace Prize winner, the face of the Civil Rights Movement, and the bearer of the dream in which we all live today. North Carolina Central University is proud to set aside this moment to honor Dr. King's legacy and grateful that you joined us for this occasion. The Rock the Mic lecture series is sponsored by Student Engagement and Leadership and the Division of Student Affairs. We have already had David Banner, Dr. Walter Kimbrough, and Sabrina Fulton grace the stage last semester, and other speakers for this spring include Dr. Angela Davis, longtime political activist and scholar, Cheyenne Webb Christenberg, civil rights activist, and Nikki Giovanni, social activist and poet. These efforts were created to bring some of the nation's top thought leaders to the sloping hills and verdant greens of North Carolina Central University so that our student body might be enlightened and well-equipped to engage in relevant discussions about the social and political changes of today's world, with speakers from educators and activists to authors and poets. The lecture series is designed to bring noted and respected icons to our very own campus to rock the mic. At each and every Rock the Mic series, we want you to know when and how to respond. So when I say rock, y'all say the mic. So let's give it a try. Ready? Rock. 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 And now, please help me in welcoming our Chancellor, Dr. Deborah Saunders White, with our official greeting.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thought I was going to mess that up, huh? To all of our wonderful students who have truly, really been uplifting the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King, especially over the last 48 hours. I greet you, to our faculty, staff, community leaders, and guests. I am just absolutely delighted to stand before you because there's so many wonderful people in this audience tonight that support our wonderful institution, North Carolina Central University. And you know, one of the things that we're extraordinarily powerful at doing is producing talented leaders to the economic fabric of North Carolina. And I'm really delighted that we have an alumnus here this evening that really personifies that. So would Representative Mickey Michaud please stand so his institution can indeed recognize him for the leader that he is. And he's also accompanied this evening by his bride, Julie Michaud. We want to recognize her. Well, yesterday, North Carolina Central University community paid tribute to the life of a peacemaker, a trailblazer who short-lived left an indelible impact, not only on our country, but on our world. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy of dreaming, soaring, and serving with a fervent passion is one that continues today and is very much alive at North Carolina Central University as we live each and every moment in truth and in service. Dr. King was fearless in his efforts to ensure members of every ethnicity in the human race was treated fairly and with the equal dignity and respect so deserved. Let us never forget the sacrifices that Dr. King and countless others, like our speaker this evening, Ambassador Andrew Young, made so that generations that followed them would live in a world free from the bitterness of hatred, injustice, and equality. Though today we struggle with conflicts that have polarized many people and communities across our country and our world, we must not be fearful of what we must continue to do to be free. This evening, our community will hear from the iconic activist and soldier in the civil rights movement, former Ambassador Andrew Young, a man who was with Dr. King on the day he was assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee, nearly 48 years ago. After having the opportunity to speak with him personally this evening, I am even more moved and ignited by his contribution to this nation and our world. I would encourage all of our students who are here tonight to listen. Be mindful of the words that you hear, the stories and the lessons that will be shared with you by this heroic servant leader. He is what we embody and think of in the words truth and service. For he is indeed a man that continues to provide goodness to this great nation. As Dr. King so poignantly said, our voices become silent the day we become silent about the things that matter. Welcome to North Carolina Central University.
At this time, we will have the introduction of our speaker, coming from Mr. Tony Cunningham of the Centennial Scholars Program, followed by another selection from our university choir and a short video. And then the next speaking voice we'll hear will be none other than that of Ambassador Andrew Young with our message. Please welcome Mr. Tony Cunningham.
Ambassador Andrew Jackson Young was born and raised in New Orleans, Louisiana. As a youngster, Andrew Young Jr.'s main interest was athletics, particularly swimming and track and field, but he also excelled academically. He graduated from Howard University in Washington, D.C. when he was only 19. In 1957, Andrew Young and Martin Luther King Jr. met for the first time. Dr. King's wife, Coretta Scott King, had gone to high school with his wife, Jean Young, and the two pastors became fast friends. Young participated in the 1963 March on Washington, where Dr. King delivered his historic I Have a Dream speech. The following year, Young was appointed executive director of the SCLC. He joined Dr. King on the March for Voting Rights in Selma, Alabama in 1965, which resulted in the passage of the Federal Voting Rights Act, empowering the federal government to prosecute cases of voters' discrimination. Young followed Dr. King in Memphis, Tennessee to support the city's striking sanitation workers, and was with his friend at the Lorraine Motel, which Dr. King was murdered on April 4, 1968. In the tumultuous years that followed, Young remained one of the most visible leaders of the nonviolent movement, while other activists became hopelessly disillusioned with the possibility of peace change. Andrew Young redoubled his efforts to make the American system of democracy work for all of his people. Returning to Atlanta, Georgia, where he had worked for many years, he ran for the United States Congress in 1970 and was narrowly defeated. 2 years later, he ran again. This time, he was successful and became the first African American to be elected to Congress from the Deep South in the 20th century. Today, a number of institutions in Georgia bear Andrew Young's name. Andrew Young International Boulevard runs past Atlanta Centennial Olympic Park. Morehouse College is home to Andrew Young Center for International Studies. And for many years, Young himself has been a professor at Georgia State University's Andrew Young School of Policy Studies. A half-century ago, the heroic days of the Civil Rights Movement, as the anniversaries of the historic milestones were celebrated. Andrew Young remained greatly in demand as a speaker for his memories of these tumultuous times. After the university choir, there will be a short video highlighting our speaker for tonight. And then I will ask you to give a warm eagle welcome to Mr. Andrew Young as he comes to rock. Thank you.
Keep your lamps trimmed and burning. Keep your lamps trimmed and burning. Keep your lamps trimmed and burning. The time is drawing nigh. Keep your lamps trimmed and burning. Keep your lamps trimmed and burning. Keep your lamps trimmed and burning. The time is drawing nigh. Children, go weary. Children, go weary. Children, go weary. Till your work is done. Children, go weary. Children, go weary.
Moses say, rock? No. I'll do the best I can. Let me just stand up here for a minute, and then if you have some questions, I'll move down there. I want to talk with you briefly about the last 50 years. Because in order to understand the present, it's important for you to understand how we got where we are. We hear a lot about it. Things is bad now. It's all right? Well, I guess I'll sit down. Now, we talk a lot about how bad things are today. But in putting Martin Luther King in perspective, he committed himself as a very young man, about 25, to redeem the soul of America from the triple evils of racism, war, and poverty. Now, I think we've made significant headway on both racism and war. Not that we've eliminated it, but there is, first of all, no legal racism. Legal racism has been struck down. There's still vestiges of racism almost everywhere, including in us. But poverty, we've made very little impact. And the challenge that Martin Luther King left us with, he left us with deliberately. He wasn't supposed to be in Memphis. He left us in New York. But he always said, you're going to die. And you don't have anything to say about when you die or how you die. He said, but you do have something to say about what you die for. And more I think about it, the more I realize that he realized that his days were numbered. So he left us in New York and told us to meet him in Washington. And he got up at 6 o'clock in the morning with Bernard Lee and Ralph Abernathy coming in from Atlanta, met him in Memphis. And it was a kind of a setup. And he never survived. But he was determined to let it be known that this was his unfinished work. That his unfinished work was doing something about the least of these God's children. And about trying to find ways to end poverty in America and the world. Now, the way we do that can be complicated. It was very hard for Martin Luther King to talk about economics, because to talk about economics in the 50s and 60s made you a communist. And by and large, he specifically put all of his messages in Bible verses. And he used the stories of the Bible to try to illustrate the conditions that we found ourselves in. Now, when we went to Birmingham, and when people say that things worse now than they were, no, the only difference is that you all got cell phones and can take pictures of what's going on. But there were 60 homes bombed in Birmingham in the year 1962. For nothing, just because some people didn't think that black people ought to have nice homes. And the area in which they started building rather nice homes, nothing fancy, but people coming back from the war, getting jobs in the steel mills, began to build nice little frame houses with some azaleas and roses in the yard, and they started living like folks. But that built up a great resentment on the part of some of the poorer white families around that happened to be members of the Klan. And so there were 60 bombings in 1962. I was in Atlanta, 150 miles from Birmingham. None of those hit the news. Fred Shuttlesworth's church was bombed 3 times in 1 year. And the last time it was bombed, the third time on December 17th, the whole house came down and everybody was sure that Fred was dead. And Fred came out of that rubble with his suit and tie on and brushed the dust out of his hair and said, I'm going to Atlanta and get my friend Martin Luther King. SCLC is going to have to come over here. We're going to have to put a stop to this. We can't just sit around and wait for change. We've got to bring a way to change the city of Birmingham, or we're going to sit here until we're all killed. So we came to Birmingham in January of 1963, and you saw the dogs, you saw the fire hoses. Really, in some ways, that was the fun part, because it was a hot day, and the dogs really didn't bite anybody. They tore some clothes, but for the most part, people just sort of kind of went along with the flow. But what made the difference was Dr. King said, we cannot continue to finance our own segregation. That if we stop paying to be segregated, we get in segregation. So the powerful thing about Birmingham was that in the year 1963, for 90 days, nobody black and very few white, and a few whites, did not spend any money on anything but food and medicine. They didn't buy any cars, they didn't buy any clothes. And what happened? The economy dried up. And people fussed, and they made a big fuss about Dr. King coming there, starting trouble. We never even answered them. We just said, look, how much are you making on that water fountain? You got one that says white and the other that says colored. The water's the same, comes through the same pipe. Is that important to your business? Well, it offends us. And we're not going to spend money in your business as long as you got white water and colored water. That doesn't make sense. When you go up and we want to buy something and you have no black women working as clerks, and they said, well, we can't find people qualified. We said, no. The women who have been there that you call maids know more about your shops and they know more about the business than the little girls that come in from Alabama and Auburn for 6 weeks at a time in the summertime. In fact, ask your wives. When they come in, if they want to know something, they don't even go to the store manager. They go to the maids because they know where everything is and what everything's going on. So we got people to be reasonable under the duress of our saying we just weren't going to finance our own oppression. And it wasn't a matter of black and white. And I can remember one of the brothers making a big fuss about how mean white folks were, and this, that, and the other. And Dr. King said, you know one thing? I sure am glad you're not white. Said, I'd hate to live under you. You know, and by and large, we did not try to make anybody feel guilty. In fact, he always said, look, our color, our status in life is an accident of birth. It's nothing that we had anything to say about. We were born in an unjust situation. And we can do something to straighten it out, and that's what we're doing. So really, after only about 60 to 90 days, we started talking. And we changed the laws of the city of Birmingham by not cooperating with the city economically. And that was the beginning. That's what the March on Washington was all about. But we talked about the dream. But nobody remembered the first part of that speech. And in the first part of that speech, Martin said, America had presented the Negro with a bad check. And when we went to the Bank of Justice, that check came back marked insufficient funds. But I do not believe that the Bank of Justice is empty. I still have a dream that one day, and I think it's that one day that we're talking about, that we have tried to implement after his death. The day when we begin to deal with the questions of poverty, job opportunity, being able to be whatever you can be and do the best that you can do and make an honest living doing it. And I'm bragging a little bit, but forgive me because I'm bragging on your school. But no city in the world has done that as well as the city of Atlanta, Georgia. And it was one of the sons of North Carolina Central who really was the economic pioneer to begin to move the African American community in Atlanta. We were well educated, we had voting rights, but less than 1% of the money spent by the city was spent with black entrepreneurs or businesses. 0% was spent with women. And so Maynard Jackson, coming out of this institution, introduced Atlanta to the concept of economic justice. And we refused to build anything unless minorities and female-owned companies participated in the building. And he held up that airport for a whole year because he didn't want to just say, okay, as we did before, 20% will go to minorities. And what they did was they gave us 20% of the hardest work with the lowest profit margin. He said, no, we through with that. We want 25% of every single contract. And every single contract, whether it's an architectural contract, whether it's the bond issue, whether it's paving or lawyering or whatever we do in relationship to this airport, 25% is going to be done by minority contractors. But we didn't have any money. But that was the other genius of Maynard Jackson. He had worked his way through this school because his father died when he was very young. And he worked his way through North Carolina Central selling encyclopedias. Now you talk about something hard. You're going to sell black folk who can't eat and don't have money for their clothes, and you're going to sell them encyclopedias. He had to be quite a salesman. But he understood money, and he understood the importance of knowledge, and he understood how to move people. And so we were able to go to Wall Street and borrow money. Now, how do you go to Wall Street and borrow money when you don't have any money? Our city was as broke as any other city. But when we were building the airport, Delta was working there, Eastern was working there, American, United. So what we did was, they called it a tombstone in Wall Street. I don't know why. But on the tombstone that borrowed the money, Delta, Eastern, United, American, AirTran, and then the Marriott hotels, and then the Hertz, Avis, National Car, and then the parking lot. Everybody had to sign on the note. The city of Atlanta is at the bottom. And everybody else had to go bankrupt before the city had to pay. So we were able to go to Wall Street with all of those signatures and come back with $478 million just by signing a name. That's the reason when people say they don't like Wall Street, it's because they don't know Wall Street. That's where the money is, and you got to figure out how to get it out and put it to work. Making a long story short, that business of the airport, which we started with $478 million. Over the last 20 years, we've probably put $15 billion into it. Same way, every time we need money, we go back, borrow some more. Because those are the people who are making the money and they have to pay. Now, the minority contractors who are selling the chicken, one friend of mine has a chicken shack in the airport, selling Popeye's fried chicken. We were kidding him the other day. I said, damn, how can you make $6 million in a year selling fried chicken in the airport? You know, I said, you came in here from Arkansas on the back of a watermelon truck. And you got with Maynard Jackson, but you know, the reason he's doing that is that he did get with Maynard Jackson. And Maynard asked him, he said, look, we have 18 counties in Georgia that have a black majority, and they don't have any black elected officials. Can you help me raise $18,000? I'd like to give each of those counties $1,000 to register voters and to start working on getting somebody elected from their county. Well, he was from the country in Arkansas, and he was kind of shy, and he didn't want to ask anybody for any money, but he came back to Maynard with his, you know, hat in his hand saying, I just can't beg, but would you mind me giving you the money? Well, when Maynard told me that story, I had never met anybody black who could write an $18,000 check for something that he didn't get anything out of, for something else. And so when I got to be mayor after Maynard, and we started with the airport and with Underground, I said, this is the kind of businessman we want to make money. And so it was because of his generosity, working to try to help poor people in 18 counties in Georgia where he had no financial interest, that we began to say, this is the kind of person we want to help. It's very hard to pick your friends, and I never picked my friends, but whenever we had two people who were qualified for the same job, I had one question to ask. And I said, I don't even want to know their names. Everybody's my friend, and I don't have any enemies, and I don't want to make any, but look and see which one of them gave the most money to the United Negro College Fund. And whoever gave the most money to the United Negro College Fund, that's the one that got the contract. Well, pretty soon, folk began to get the message. If you're going to make money in Atlanta, you got to take care of our institutions, and you've got to support our young people. And that's the way that city has grown. When Maynard became mayor in 1973, I had already been elected to Congress in 1972, and Atlanta was just getting to 1 million people. Detroit was 6 million. Now, years later, Atlanta is 6.5 million, and Detroit has dwindled to 1 million. Now that doesn't mean y'all supposed to abandon what here, Raleigh, Durham, and Charlotte, and come to Atlanta. We got enough folk in Atlanta, and we got it right. When I left Howard University, Dave Dinkins tried to keep me in New York. I said, no, you all got it made in New York. We got to go straighten out Atlanta. And so I'm telling you this to get you to come to Atlanta. I'm telling you this to say that wherever you go, you've got to learn some of the lessons that Maynard Jackson learned in this institution. You should be learning too. And you should be learning how to make money. Now, I like people who tell me that they want to start a nonprofit. And I said, please don't. Because if you ain't got no money and starting a nonprofit, begging is not a career. And that's what it is if you got a nonprofit. You got to find a way to make some money, honey. Really. And it's easier than you think. But you've got to learn the lessons of economic development in a capitalist society. And you can complain about it, but it ain't changing in your lifetime or mine. And if you want to survive in it, you need to find a way to at least get at the top of the food chain, which is what happened to Maynard Jackson. Now, he never made any money. He almost died broke. But because of the Institute, because when you're in politics, you can't make money. You have to help others. And sometimes they will help you. Most of the time they won't. But we brought the Olympics to Atlanta. We raised $2.5 billion. I was the chairman, and I've helped bring it. But nobody in my family could make any money. And everybody else made money. The city's doing very well. But if you're going to be a political, social, and economic or religious leader, you've got to think about helping others. My daddy told me a story when I was a very little boy. He said, son, you can't cut corners. He said, you're going to have to be 100% right. And back then they had something called Ivory Soap. Still have Ivory Soap. And Ivory Soap used to advertise, Ivory Soap is 99 and 44/100% pure. And my daddy said, you see that? Ivory Soap can get by being 99 and 44/100% right. He said, but Ivory Soap is white. You black. Nothing less than 100%. And because they will be looking to find anything wrong. And I really lived by that. I never touched a penny. But you know what they came after me for? Because one of my good friends was getting a divorce. And I called his wife to try to give her some emotional support and tell her it wasn't the end of the world. And next thing you know, they were dragging me up before a grand jury trying to charge me with obstruction of justice. It's not fair out there. It's not a level playing field. And you can't be 99 and 44/100% right. You've got to live by the letter of the law, even as you live in the spirit of the law. And I wish it were different. And maybe someday it will be, but as long as we are a minority, and it might look like we're a majority in some neighborhoods, but overall we're 10%, 11%. And the majority, by and large, resents the very progress that we've made. The Atlanta airport didn't cost anybody anything. We didn't charge any taxpayer. The Olympics didn't charge the taxpayers any money. We built that like we built the airport. That airport last year, though it only it only cost $14 billion, made $38 billion. And minority businesses got at least 40% of every dollar made. And there are 400,000 jobs around that airport. Now that's Maynard Jackson's contribution to the city of Atlanta. He took Martin Luther King's dream to overcome the evils of racism, war, and poverty. And he translated that ending poverty into the creation of jobs through the airport, through Underground Atlanta. Together we worked on the Olympics. And by and large, we've been trying to generate wealth. And that's what you have to do in this world. The problems we have almost anywhere are almost all rooted in economics. Ferguson is, you know what Ferguson is, and Black Lives do matter. But the fact is that a lot of the jobs in St. Louis were related to Anheuser-Busch. You know, this bud's for you. The Belgians bought them and moved them out of town somewhere. A lot of jobs missing. Monsanto was a big employer there. In fact, they even took the football team from St. Louis last week. You know, they go into California. What does that mean? That means that the parents of the young men in Ferguson who used to have jobs, there are no jobs there anymore. And as long as there are no jobs and there are policemen who are poorly paid and poorly trained and scared to death of black folk, you're going to have problems. But what we did in Atlanta, and there again, Maynard started that. He started by getting us a black police chief and a black public safety commissioner. Both of them had PhDs. And so we upgraded our criminal justice system intellectually. And then we started training the policemen on down. And as we trained them, we brought in, you know, when you start training people and demanding that they work, they start moving over to other counties and to the rural areas where you can be a sergeant in Atlanta and you can go out to Ludowici and you can be the chief. And they did. So that gave us an opportunity to bring in more black police officers and women. So roughly the formula that works for us in Atlanta is a police force that's roughly half and half black and white, and a third of them female. Because women seem to be much more interested in crime prevention. When we talk about cyber crime, everybody's saying that Atlanta now is the female trafficking capital of the South. And that's probably true. But when I asked the police chief about it, he said, you know, all of this now is online. We don't have people walking in the streets. We don't know where these places are. There are no old-fashioned whorehouses. No people, streetwalkers. It's all online. So if we're going to deal with some of the problems of female trafficking, we've got to have people who understand technology. And criminology and technology are blending and merging. And so you can't have just a kid with a high school diploma and you give him a blue uniform and a stick and a gun and put him in charge of something. That will not work in 2016. Nowhere. Not Ferguson, not here, not Atlanta. Law enforcement has got to become professional. And that's what we did. We encouraged our police officers to go back to Clark Atlanta University, go back to Georgia State, get their degrees in criminology, get their degrees in computer science, and do it while they were on our payroll. And it's a struggle to make things work nowadays, but when they work and work right, you can feel awful proud. And I think that's what Martin Luther King was trying to lead us toward when he went to Memphis. He wanted everybody to be able to live above the poverty line. And he wanted everybody to have in fact, he said that he had the audacity to believe that this country could produce jobs for all of its citizens, education for the mind, health, housing, that we could make this society work if we got together and made it work. And by and large, that's what we've been trying to do. And I think we've done better than we think we've done. I always say that, we have a kind of what I call a sore toe society. If you've got a hangnail on your big toe, that's all you can think about. Your feet hurt all the time, every step you take. Your brain's working, your heart's working, your lungs are working, your blood, your blood's flowing, your kidneys, everything is working well, but you can't think of all the things that are right about you because you're worried about that damn toe. And that's the way we are about the world in which we live. Every evening on the news, there's plenty of good stuff happening all over the country, all over the world. They don't have that. They look somewhere to find something freaky and weird and crazy, and you hear it over your dinner table, you hear it before you go to bed, you wake up to the same thing the next morning, and you get the impression that the world is going to hell in a handbasket. Well, I was just about 9 years old when the World War II started. And we knew we were at war, but we had to go to a movie theater to see what Pearl Harbor looked like. And Franklin Roosevelt, the president, could get on the radio and say the only thing we have to fear is fear itself, and people would believe it because he was the president and they knew that he knew more than they did. Unfortunately, that has not been true for President Barack Obama. Everybody knows what's going on everywhere else, and even before he hears about it, they're blaming it on him. But the brother is cool, and he does not get discombobulated. I don't care what they do to it. You know, and that was another lesson my daddy gave to me when, in fact, he used to say, you know, you got a brain, you got fists to fight, you got feet to run. You're not going to be able to beat everybody because you're little. You're not going to be able to outrun everybody but when people get in a fight, they get emotional. And when they get emotional, it turns the mind off. And if you can keep your mind turned on, that means stay cool, then there's no battle you can't win. Now that's where we are now. We're in a battle of the mind. We're in a battle where, you know, people might not treat you right, and you got a right to complain if you want to complain, but it does not do any good. The only thing that'll do you some good is don't get mad, get smart. Think your way through the difficulties ahead. Try to see in the midst of the fog a clear direction that you can take. And slowly but surely, with faith in God, find a way, as the song said, find a rock in the weary land. Now, I was worried a little while about the young people who are always hollering Black Lives Matter, till they picked a song. And the song they picked was, as sort of their theme, Kendrick Lamar, All Right is All Right. Y'all know that, don't you? Well, you know why I like that? Because we had a song that the Impressions did in the 60s that said, it's all right, it's all right, have a good time, because it's all right. You know? And then I remember my grandmama used to have a song that she used to sing from way back. I got a feeling everything's gonna be all right. Oh, I've got a feeling everything's gonna be all right. Don't you know I've got a feeling everything's gonna be all right. Be all right, be all right, be all right. Now I think, you know, that's my line. And that's the best I can do. But y'all can rock these mics here. And any question you got nerve enough to ask, I got nerve enough to try to answer. You might not like the answer. But I think this is what the program is about. And you don't have to believe in what I say. You know, the one thing is that you have to find your own way through this life, but learn from the experience of others. Learn from the others who have gone on before you, and at least don't make the same mistakes we made. Because we did make a lot of mistakes.
My name is Darrell Myers. My question to you, because you talked about economics, and I'm pretty sure you're familiar with the infrastructure that Durham used to have as being considered Black Wall Street in the early 30s and 40s. How do we bring back that economic power to a still very strong and permanent black culture here in Durham?
That's a very good question, because we have the same problem on Auburn Avenue. Auburn Avenue used to be a Black Wall Street in Atlanta, and it got integrated. And I would say overall, folk are better off in an integrated economy than in a segregated economy. And I mean, like this brother, I saw y'all had JC's anointed chicken or something like that. Past there, that's a nice, you know, where you pig feet and chitlins and the restaurant. That's a nice restaurant. So it's a good historical landmark. But I don't think I want to trade that for the brother that's making $6 million worth of chicken in the Atlanta airport. Because there are 100 million people that came through the Atlanta airport last year. 100 million. So he just has to sell every 100th person a piece of chicken. So, whereas, you know, the Black Wall Street in Durham or Auburn Avenue in Atlanta basically thrived because during the Second World War, there were very few places that soldiers and people with a little money could go and do well. And so we were ghettoized. I think now we're building a $1.4 billion person Falcons don't have such a good team, but we're going to have a good stadium. And I'm rooting for the Panthers, even though I'm But I tell you this, 40% of all the money made in that stadium is going to be made by black folk and women. It's right across the street from Clark and Morehouse and Spelman. And that area is going to change. And what I need this generation to do, we did the best we could integrating what we had. And we integrated it and got a fair share of the growth and development. But where do we go next? Now, we're almost doing too good in Atlanta. Lockheed, that's sending people to the moon, building C-130s and all that kind of stuff. 3 of the top people at Lockheed now are graduates of HBCUs. And one woman is the number 2 person there. And, you know, that's better than a little colored bank on Auburn Avenue. Well, let me slide on that. That's probably the best I can do. Unless you want to come back with another question. Let me let this one, okay.
What was your first impression of Martin Luther King when you first met him, and did you think that he would be a big influence during his time he was alive when you first met him?
Yeah, I first met Martin Luther King right after Montgomery started. I was pastoring in a little country church in Thomasville, Georgia. And Talladega College, that same fraternity he had around his neck, had a religious emphasis week, and they invited Martin Luther King to speak, and I say they figured he might not show up, so they invited me as a backup. And we both showed up. And the thing that impressed me about him was that we were both he's about 3 years older than me, but we both had baby girls. And we didn't talk about civil rights, we didn't talk about black folk, white folk, or no politics. He was only interested in his baby daughter, and I was interested in my baby daughter. And so we met as fathers. And then we realized that our wives had gone to the same high school. But what was more miraculous than the fact that they went to the same high school was that there was a Quaker couple that came to that little high school in Alabama and picked out these two girls, and one of them went to Antioch College in Ohio, and my wife went to Manchester College in Indiana. The thing that was significant about that was that those were probably only schools I know of where teaching nonviolence, New Testament nonviolence, was a required course. And in the 1950s, that was unheard of, because we were still talking about just war, and that we should have gone to war with Germany earlier. And I mean, it was not a passive climate. And for us to have met women who were committed to nonviolence, and let me tell you how that translated. So, Maynard Jackson's grandfather asked me to run a voter registration drive down in Thomasville and Beachton, Georgia. And so I went down, and I figured there wasn't any problem. We put up signs, and we came around the curve coming back from a neighboring town. And lo and behold, there were about 100 Klansmen in sheets with their pointed hats. And I'm riding in the car with just my wife and my 3-month-old daughter. And so I said, oh, Lord, we can't run, because our house was a little shack, and all they had to do, one match would have gone up in smoke. So I said, baby, we're going to go and wait for them. But I'm going to stay down here, and I'm going to talk to them and try to reason with them. Now, in order for me to reason with them, I want you to sit in the window with the rifle painted and pointed at the gun that I'm trying to reason with. I said, then I can negotiate from a position of strength. So if something happened to me, something happened to him. And she says, I can't do that. I said, you can. I said, you're a very good shot. You shoot better than me. And she said, yeah, but that's at skeets and things like that. I don't shoot at people. I said, that's not people, that's the Ku Klux Klan. She said, aren't you a preacher? I said, yeah, well, what's that got to do with it? She said, if you ever forget that under that sheet is the heart of a child of God, then you need to quit preaching. I said, damn. I said, what about your little baby? I mean, we got a 3-month-old baby in this house. What about her? She said, don't you preach about heaven? She said, that's the best chance we got to get there. I said, good God Almighty, what kind of woman did I marry? But the thing about it was that they were spiritually committed to a struggle. And it wasn't if my wife saw the shoes that you all wear, she would say, good God Almighty, what is happening to my people? $1,000 shoes, these high-heel pumps. I went to Paris one time, and I brought her back a Hermes scarf. You know, it didn't cost but $16 back then. You know, she would never wear it. She said, this could feed a family for a week. And she would never touch it. My daughter's wear it now. But I'm saying that there were people like Jean and Coretta who realized that it took real sacrifice. I mean, for me, the girl I was going with at Howard, when I told her I was going to be a preacher going back south, she said, bye-bye. You know, and Martin Luther King's top salary was $6,000 a year. You know, we had to cut it real close. And he said, if you're going to work for poor people, you've got to live like poor people. I said, well, okay. That's what you said, you know, and he did. And one of the reasons why his children have such bad press is that he left them broke. My son says, you all gave us the worst of both worlds. You gave us fame with no fortune. He said, because everybody knows who we are, they all think we're rich. They don't know. You left us poor as church mouse. You know, but the thing about them is that none of them's ever been to jail. None of them's been on drugs. None of them's beat up anybody. They live good, simple Christian lives, but they don't have the resources or the background to be what their father was. And my son said, look, I got nothing to do with preaching and nothing to do with politics. He said, nobody in this house has ever figured out how to make money. And he said, that's my calling. And you can, you know, I said, well, if that's what you want to do, I said, just remember, the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, and if you make any, you got to give it to God's children. He said, well, let me make it first. But that's where we were, and that's what, I mean, we didn't know where we were going. We didn't know what we would have become. And we were pretty sure that none of us would see 40. But Martin said, look, to be a free man, you've got to overcome the love of wealth and the fear of death. If you love money too much, they can buy you off. If you're afraid to die, they can scare you off. But if you're not afraid to die and you don't have a price on your head or on your soul, you can be free. And you have to negotiate that fine line of right and wrong to lead people to freedom. But you can't be scared, and you probably can't be rich.
In a culture where we look at each other and we say, oh, she's pretty for a dark-skinned girl, for a light-skinned girl, and we have our own stereotypes of ourselves as a culture that we're almost like force-fed from younger, how do you turn the mind state of a culture around? How do you change, not even so much the world's view, but other people's views of themselves? Like, what would be your first steps to change the way we look at ourselves?
Well, I think that self-acceptance, I mean, I tell little children especially, look in the mirror and see who you are and say, God knew what he was doing when he made me, and this is the way I'm supposed to be. You know, if you want to be somebody else or look like somebody else, you're going to be messed up all your life. You got to learn to be you and whoever you are called to be. And there's no such thing as somebody that's worthless. I mean, God uses everybody, all of us, in some way. And you just have to be as prepared as you can be and be the best that you can be. And, you know, my wife is always telling other women, say, oh, I like that dress. You sure look good in that color. And her other friends said, why is it you always complimenting other women? And she said, because I just think it's good for us to feel good about each other. And the alternative is say, look at her. She thinks she's cute. And that cattiness, I mean, I think even in the movement we had it. We had Ralph Abernathy wishing he was Martin Luther King. You know, Jesse Jackson wishing he was Martin Luther King. The reason I got along with Martin is I didn't want to be Martin Luther King because I knew he was going to be the first one shot. I didn't mind being the second one, but I didn't want to be the first one. You know, and the burdens that were placed on him, because I mean, from the time he was 25 years old, he finished his doctoral dissertation, and he went to Montgomery trying to stay out of politics. He didn't want to be around Atlanta because they wanted him to be the vice president of Morehouse, and they were going to try to make him run for something. So he goes to what he felt was the most conservative backward town he could find, with the most sedity Baptist church in the country, Dexter Avenue Baptist Church. And lo and behold, 2 weeks after he finishes his PhD dissertation and mails it in to Boston University, Rosa Parks sits down in the bus. And he was in the back running the mimeograph machine. He wasn't trying to be the leader. And the Baptist and the Methodist preachers got to arguing about it, and the women got together and went to Mr. E.D. Nixon and said, look, these preachers are going to be fussing back and forth amongst each other. We will never be able to get it off the ground. Why don't we try to help that young man back there in the mimeograph machine? Let him be the spokesperson. And that's how he got to be the leader of the Montgomery Improvement Association, by not wanting to be a leader. And he got pushed into it. See? And you do the best you can with those around you. And this is basketball country. And you all know a lot about basketball. But I had a bunch of kids who'd been in and out of jail at the YMCA that I work with. And they all were for LeBron James and the Heat. It was a couple of years back. And I said, well, LeBron is the best player in the world. I said, they don't come any better than the Heat. I said, how come they lost? And finally, it got real silent until one little boy said, because the Spurs played as a team. See? And I think that's the key to life. I said, look, if you all can learn to play as a team and help each other and build each other up instead of putting each other down, then we can make it. See? And we challenge them right there. I said, look, you all are smart. You just do stupid things over and over and over again. I said, look, can we be smart for 6 weeks? They said, uh-huh. I said, if you can be smart for 6 weeks, we can tutor you and get you a GED, and we can get you in a college. But this was the 15th of June. We can get you in a college by the 15th of August. 12 of them made it. And they're in their second, third year now. And they would have all been in jail if they had kept on doing the foolishness they were on the street. Now, I think that's, well, I don't know, I don't want to get into the fraternity sorority business, but when I hear some of the little pettiness that goes on in our society amongst people who, if I didn't know them privately, I would think they were great people. But we spend too much time trying to put each other down instead of building each other up. And if we could spend the time that we spend finding fault with each other, supporting, giving a positive reinforcement, and it doesn't take much. The one thing I'm proud of that I can do, I can write. And you know the reason I can write? Because a 4th grade teacher put her arms around me, and no other teacher had ever said anything good to me before. A 3rd grade teacher put me out, but the 4th grade teacher hugged me and said, you sure form your letters good. You write just like the penmanship book. That was 75 years ago, and I'm still writing good because that lady hugged me. It does not take much to build each other up. But we can build, if we start building each other up, it's amazing how we can grow.
My question is, what direction do you think the world is going in, and do you think history is repeating itself?
Can you say that a little slower? What direction I think the world is going?
Going in, and do you think history is repeating itself?
Which way is the world going, and do I think history repeats itself? It can, and I think that there are some group of people who are afraid of the future, and they're trying to go back to what they think of as the good old days. So I don't think, I enjoyed my childhood, I enjoyed my youth, and I enjoyed my time in college. I've enjoyed life, but there's nothing that looks as good to me as the future. So, and the future constantly surprises me. That when Maynard left us in very good shape in the airport and everything else, but when they made me mayor, and I went into a group of businessmen, and I said, look, there's no money in Washington. There's no money in the state capitol. If we're going to get money, we're going to have to go through Wall Street, and we're going to have to do international finance. I said, Atlanta's only hope is to become the next great international city. And one of the bankers said to my friend, where in the hell did that nut come from? Well, I had been around the world. I mean, one of the things, I knew the world. I knew where the money was. I knew people from Nigeria where they had oil surplus. I knew that the Saudi Arabian oil money was in Kuwait and in Holland and Germany and Japan. So we went to the places where the money was being kept and encouraged them to come and invest it in Atlanta. And you create your future. And one of the things that Jesse says that I steal from him from time to time, but I always try to give him credit, he says, if you can conceive it and believe it, you can achieve it. And so you decide what you want the world to be. And if you can believe it and work on it patiently, you'll be surprised. Other people will start believing with you. And the Bible says to us, where there is no vision, the people perish. And I think that's what's happening right now. I think there's no vision in one party because they're looking back. They're trying to stop immigration. Well, this is a country of immigrants. And I said to the group the other night, I said, if you want to think about what you believe about integration, just remember that Steve Jobs was the son of a Syrian immigrant. And a Syrian immigrant son has built the biggest country. Well, Apple now is the biggest company in the country, maybe one of the biggest in the world. Immigration has been good for this country, and we have always benefited from immigration. And it doesn't mean that there aren't some problems with it, but we're not looking back to try to make it like it used to be. We're trying to find which way America must go in the future. And you're going to have to contribute to that vision. You can't wait for somebody else to believe it or see it.
Good evening, Ambassador Young. I'm Thurman Tatum III. I'm a junior here at North Carolina Central University, and I have a question for you, but in order for me to get it across clearly, I have to recite a short poem. It says, every morning in Africa, a gazelle wakes up. He knows he must outrun the fastest lion or he will be eaten. Every morning in Africa, a lion wakes up. He knows that he must outrun the slowest gazelle or he will starve to death. It doesn't matter whether you're a lion or a gazelle. When the sun comes up, you better be running. So, from activists, from the civil rights movement, how does our generation continue running just as like yourself and many others have before us?
Well, that's a good point. I hope it's not completely true. I hope that human beings can learn to live together without eating or being eaten. I think that's what Dr. King was talking about in terms of the beloved community. And elephants last a lot longer than gazelles or lions. And you know, the elephant is a family species. They support each other. They look out for the young. The fathers protect the women. So the law of the jungle isn't always eat or be eaten. We can also find ways to cooperate and survive. And right now, I think I like to translate all of the problems of the future into jobs. There are two problems that I think you're going to have to face constantly all of the days of your life. And let me say, I'm going back to Howard University in May. My granddaughter is graduating from the engineering school, and it'll be my 65th anniversary from college. See? But I was scared to death on graduation day, because I knew I was supposed to know something and have figured out life, and my parents didn't play. They said, look, we will get you through college debt-free, and then you on your own. And even though I was just 19, I said, oh, what am I going to do now? And I tell you what happened. It was right along here. I was coming back from Howard, and we stopped down the road here just north of Charlotte at Kings Mountain. There was a school there, and there were no hotels to stay in, so my parents knew the people at the school, and they stopped there to stay, and I didn't want to be bothered with there was a church conference going on. I wasn't interested in that. So I went out to take a run. And I ran up to the top of this mountain, Kings Mountain. And I'd been on the swimming team and the track team, so I was in very good shape, but I pushed myself too hard. And I could hardly breathe when I reached the top of that mountain. But it was a moment of clarity in my life that I've never forgotten. Because when I got to the top of that mountain and I looked around, everything seemed to have a purpose. Everything seemed to be like it was supposed to be, and it just hit me. If God has a purpose for the trees and the sunflowers and the wheat and the corn, there's got to be a purpose for me. And that's all I knew. I came down from that mountain. And I said, I'm going to do the best I can one day at a time and leave it to the Lord. And the Lord ain't never failed me. And He won't fail you.
My name is Michael Hopkins. I'm a sophomore here. Thank you so much for coming to speak to us. My question was, can you speak more on how you feel about the Black Lives Matter movement and the direction you think it's headed, and how they can be more effective in today's current focus?
What do I think about the Black Lives Matter? Let me say that they're starting a new phase of a new problem, but now, we didn't have to start that way. I was in 6th grade, and my civics teacher took me to see Thurgood Marshall in a federal courtroom in Louisiana. And that was 1941. And all the way back to 41, the NAACP was laying a foundation of legal strategy that we escalated a little bit with the nonviolent movement. But essentially, it was the same platform, and it was the same agenda. And when we got together at the March on Washington, everybody was together around the same platform. Now, this is not a new phenomenon. That's what I said, that if there were 60 bombings and Fred's church was bombed 3 times, killing black folks is nothing new. when the 4 little girls were killed in the church in Birmingham, that got a lot of publicity. But the fact that they castrated and killed a young teenage boy on that same day, probably the same people, never got the news. See, now, in an era of technology, everybody knows everything. So I think that you've got to use the technology as you're doing with the body cameras. We're putting up on almost every street light in Atlanta now. They're starting to put up cameras so that anything that happens almost anywhere in the city, the cameras are running for 3 days and they got a record of it. That Black Lives Matter has got to evolve into a strategy of ending not only police brutality, but all violence. It's a different subject, but it's just as difficult for me, more difficult, see, to deal with a drive-by shooting in Atlanta. We got the police trained. We haven't had an incident like that in a long, long time. But we still have not stopped black youth from shooting each other over nothing. And the best that we've been able to do is get them into the Y. And the YMCA has been sort of the saving grace for our black communities. We had neighborhood community centers. If we can get young people into an institution of some sort, not a criminal institution, a supportive institution, then that makes a difference. So I want us to make Black Lives Matter. And you have a volunteer program here. When you go to a school and tutor a teenager or a 4th grader, that's saying this black life matters. And we never blamed white people for segregation. Dr. King said that, look, you can't help it that you were born black or white. We were born in an unjust situation. And so rather than blame somebody else for that situation, we need to take our responsibility for changing it, and we need to kind of help them take responsibility for changing. And so, just like the sit-in movement grew from sit-ins to freedom rides, to voting rights, to economic rights, I think Black Lives Matter has to continue to grow and evolve. And the passion and the enthusiasm can't be allowed to just dwindle away. It's got to maintain, it's got to build a focus and an agenda. One of the reasons why the Atlanta sit-in movement and the Nashville sit-in movement did better than most was that in Atlanta, Dr. Mays and the college president said, look, okay, you all sit down and write what your demands are, what your complaints are, and I will raise the money and I will take a full-page ad in the Constitution, Atlanta Constitution, to publish what this is all about. I think the same sort of thing happened in Nashville. it didn't happen in New Orleans. And so without an intellectual grounding that keeps the movement growing in the direction that you want it to grow in, it's liable to disperse as people, get tired of going about their business to other things. So I hope this movement stays together, and I hope it continues to evolve. But like the Occupy Wall Street movement of about 3 years ago, back in 2008, it never defined what it wanted. And so we don't hear any more about it. Now, we didn't agree with that movement because we liked Wall Street, because we made Wall Street serve the poor of Atlanta. And so you don't want to, you don't want to get mad and throw away things that you might need. And so that requires sitting together and thinking together and developing your agenda for the future. But like I said, Kendrick Lamar singing "It's All Right," it'll be all right. But it's not automatically all right. It takes faith and it takes some organization to keep it moving.
Good evening, Ambassador White. Good evening, Ambassador Young, and welcome to Central. My name is Brian Sterling. I'm a second-year graduate student in the Public Administration program and also a member of the Citizens Advisory Committee of the City of Durham. My question is from a public administrator perspective. Being that the climate of America is at an all-time high critical level, do you think the mindset and how we approach debate and address political and economic social justice issues should be different than how we're doing it to restore a level of integrity and consistency in the outcomes that we often receive and we don't agree with?
Yeah, I think you have to do it different because people are different. But old folks used to say you got one mouth and 2 ears. So the more you listen, the better off you're going to be. And Jimmy Carter's presidency went through 4 years without getting any Americans killed and without killing anybody. And one of the reasons was that he gave me a little note when I was sworn in as ambassador saying, I want you to go to Africa and ask African leaders what they expect of this administration. I don't think any other president has ever done that. Reagan got up and started talking about empires of evil. Well, yeah, that's one point of view. But Carter said, go to these people and listen to them and see what they've got to say. And we'll know what they want us to do and what we can do together. And I think that cooperation and trying to fashion win-win solutions in public policy and community relations and even in your family. The hardest place to be for me to be nonviolent is at home. Because your wife and your children, they know how to push your buttons. I don't get mad with white folk. You know, I mean, it just, that's not, I can handle that. Because I'm not emotionally involved. I can be rational about that. But if I do something at home, it takes me a while. I have to walk around the block to get myself together sometimes. And I think that I never went to the city council meeting. Your mayor was saying he was going to the city council meeting. I never went to our city council meetings because I would get so upset with the city council who represented the same people that I represent, and they'd want to bargain. I said, look, either we're going to do it or we're not going to do it. I'm not going to do you a favor because you do me a favor. We'll do something because it's right. And if it's not right, we won't do it. And so I don't like this give and take, swapping politics. Or friendship. Whether you treat me right or not, I'm going to treat you right.
Thank you for your service.
Let's give Ambassador Young a great Eagle standing ovation. As we close tonight, we have remarks from one of our Centennial Scholar members, Mr. Evan Jeffers. Please come to the stage. And the young man that has the portrait, please come to the stage.
My name is Evan Jeffers, and this is a letter I wrote to Ambassador Young. Dear Ambassador Young, as a student at North Carolina Central University, I would like to take this time to thank you for your great contributions to the civil rights movement and for your continued efforts in making our world a better place. As a young man trying to make a difference in the world as well, your example has greatly inspired me. From your work during the civil rights movement to your time in the political arena fighting against apartheid and other atrocities, your tenacity, patience, and strength have given us the fuel and energy to continue to fight against injustice. The partnership and friendship that you share with Dr. King has also inspired me. It has taught me that one man can change the world, but only when that man has great friends and a strong support system behind him. I have also learned that you don't always have to be extremely radical to be a warrior for your cause, and you do not have to be directly in the spotlight to be recognized for your valiant efforts. Your example to my generation is duly noted and recognized. Once again, I appreciate you for being a model black man and a model human being. Thank you for your service to this nation and the entire world. Sincerely, Evan Jeffers.
Hello, Mr. Young, and thank you for coming to North Carolina Central University. My name is L.A. Cheston, and I'm an artist, and I just want to express a little bit of my gratitude for you coming out today by presenting you with a portrait.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Again, on behalf of Chancellor Saunders White and the Division of Student Affairs, we thank you for coming out to North Carolina Central's annual Martin Luther King Jr. celebration. Please know that we will rock the mic again on February 10th with Angela Davis at 7 p.m. here in the B.N. Duke Auditorium. Again, thank you for coming out. Good night.